theory has to have a priority.
Capitalism and artificial intelligence are the same thing.
The dimension of the future has disappeared.
There is actually no representation anymore.
There is no final resolution to contradiction.
Militant proletarian snake handling over abysses never gets much wilder than this.
All right, everybody, welcome back to The Dangerous Maybe. And today, Nance and I are going to be reading an incredibly special section of Slavoj Žižek's work in one of his books called The Metastases of Enjoyment. We have long been wanting to return to this little project of ours, which is to read through all of chapter 3 of this book. And that chapter is called, see, I'm jealous. You got the original. I want that one. That's so much better.
Secondhand bookstores, man. I think I got.
I have never seen. You know, it's crazy. I've never seen a copy, like an original copy of any of the main Zizek books.
I think I got this from the anarchist bookstore that's up the road from me.
Really?
It used to be an anarchist bookstore, and now it's, I don't know what it is now, because the guy during COVID, the guy kind of became like a COVID denier, Tea Party Trump supporter type guy. So I don't know what it is now, but it's a cool old bookstore.
Yeah, so Michael of Žižek and so on, I've long been jealous of his Žižek library because he has the original covers, the original copies of the books.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, I have this crummy, but what's not crummy is what's actually in the book. And so chapter 3 of this book is one of the great Žižek chapters. And anybody who's been following us knows that my approach to teaching Žižek is always chapter based primarily, because there's certain chapters in each of the main books that just jump out. They're just above and beyond the others. And this is true of Sublime Object. This is true of Tearing with the Negative. It's true of Ticklish Subject and Parallax View and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know why that's the case, that there's always that one chapter that really is so essential to Žižekian theory, but that's how it turns out. I mean, if I had it my way, I would take these chapters and
make
just
one
smash
super
them
cut
into one book, right?
Yeah, man.
And be like, there's the Žižek masterpiece, right? Well, absolutely certain about this. Chapter 3 of Metastases of Enjoyment, called Superego by Default, is one of the great chapters in Žižek's work. Arguably the one that's had the most influence on us. And it's just Žižek at his best. This is why, why do you like Žižek so much? This shit. And if you think you know Žižek because you've seen some interviews of his, or you've read a couple of the Substack articles, or what, that's not him. The vast majority of the time, he never talks about his core theoretical contributions that are tucked away in these books. And so one of the first videos you and I did was the first section of Superego by Default. And we have wanted to return to this for, I mean, since almost last summer, I think, right?
Yeah, it has been almost a year at this point.
Wild. So we're going to try to do more of these on this chapter. We want to finish this. we are both really about finishing projects we start, and so we will do that. This the first section that we read is probably the main section of this chapter because it is the core theory of superego and inherent transgression, and that lays the foundation for the chapter. But this second one is right up there with it, and it's not so much about superego. Somebody could you can read this on its own almost and get the point. And I mean, it all comes back to superego in this chapter. But for here and now, we're just going to talk about the split subject of ideology. But you know, I this is something I've just so incorporated into my own thinking that it's almost a default. It's split subject of ideology by default for me. But it's great to come back and revisit it. And this is one of these texts that I'm just going to always come back to. But what's cool, like there's a repetition in difference because we've been doing cool stuff on your channel. Tell people what we've been doing.
Well, we've done 6 sessions of reading through the Accursed Share. We started that at the beginning of this year, I think. So we've managed to do 6 readings of the Accursed Share. A couple days ago, you and I had a weekend update episode where we talked about pessimism. I think that's the first time we've talked about pessimism. Oddly enough, both of us being pessimists. We don't really get an opportunity, even though I do think it's always present. We never really get a chance to explicitly talk about our pessimism. So we've been doing that. The superego makes itself known in our readings of Bataille. I think especially in the last 2 episodes of the Bataille reading, superego has been like a main fixture. And that might seem odd to some people. Like, wait, Bataille is talking about superego? Well, no, he's not explicitly talking about superego.
He is if we view the sun as a superego.
Right. And this splendor and plenitude that kind of is, and then the order of things. But no, like the way we're reading it, I think we're taking what is there and really fleshing it out and showing why it matters instead of just doing like, oh, Bataille is a weird guy who likes the sun and likes to be edgy and transgressive. Like we're really, I think, doing a good job of showing why it matters, like why the general view matters and why scarcity versus abundance, like when the world is framed based on scarcity, what happens and what we might be able to accomplish if we reframe everything from a position of abundance and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, we've been doing that as well as, I mean, having awesome interviews with people and getting a lot of stuff done.
I mean, like the last week I've written more than I have in a long time. And so, I mean, that feels great to get that done. But no, everybody go over to 3 Billion Nances. I presuppose that you already have, but if you're new here, check it out. I mean, we're like, what is it companion channels? Like, it's like, yeah. I don't know what our term is for it, but that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if, I don't know, if Deleuze and Guattari were on YouTube, I would imagine it would be something similar to how they wrote, or Marx and Engels, or I don't know, Siegfried and Roy. I don't know.
Now, see, if you had cats, it would have been. You just have to have dogs.
Yeah.
You know. But no, if you like what goes on in the Dangerous Maybe, you got to go over to 3 Billion Nances. If you like 3 Billion Nances, check out the Dangerous Maybe. That's where we're at. Okay, so let's do this thing. I think maybe I'll just The first section starts off, he talks about superego, and the point is that every symbolic order, every social system, any society, it has official rules that it claims that it lives by, and it does live by them in a way, of course. Official rules or values, standards, practices, all of this kind of stuff. But Zizek points out that what really holds a society together is a form of inherent transgression, where people can engage in excessive enjoyment, and that society secretly goads you to enjoy in this way. Um, and the social agency that pressures you to enjoy is superego. And so if we think about the symbolic law, the social order, as Janus faced, it has two sides to it. The big other, which is this kind of this sense where the law itself has a quasi personified status where you feel like the law is another person who watches you and evaluates you, etc. And the big other, it instructs you on what one does, how to go about being a generic subject, and generic here is not used as a pejorative. It just means knowing your basics about how to engage in the world, right? And it seems to be concerned with the collective good. It seems to be concerned with morality. It seems to be concerned with the protocols of proper cultural functioning, all this kind of stuff. And what Zizek's great insight is that yes, there is this thing called the big other. There's also a thing called the superego, and it supplements it. And Mladen Delar, in his book Rumors, he'll talk about this as the dark twin, the double of the big other. And it's the social agency that basically tells you don't limit yourself, uh, don't live according to the mean, have access, engage in transgressive activities, etc. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
And the problem is, though, there is a antagonism between big other and superego, even though they ultimately form a unit, right? And the point is that this split in the social order is a split that's ideological, because all the stuff, all the forms of transgression that the superego spurs you on to enjoy, seems like this is an area of freedom. Like, see, I'm not just the puppet of the big other. I transgress.
I do what I want. I
I'm a
do what I
bad
want.
kid, Maury. I do what I want, right? But in reality, you're not doing what you want. You're doing the conformist form of enjoyment. And it actually helps to reproduce the social order. So your transgression isn't actually subversive. Um, and so this split within the law itself has a correlate in a sense, which is the split in the subject. And that's how he pivots to what we're going to talk about here today, which is the split subject of ideology. If big other and superego mark the split within the law itself, then we're going to talk about a subject that is itself internally divided. So, I don't know, you want to kick us off here?
Let's do it. We could also say that this nightly obscene law consists of proton pseudos, the primordial lie that founds a community. That is to say, identification with community is ultimately always based upon some shared guilt, or more precisely, upon the fetishistic disavowal of this guilt. When, for example, a communist in the Soviet Union of the 1930s answers the reproach that the communist regime is terroristic beyond compare, that thousands are condemned and shot without proven guilt, that the whole of agriculture is in ruins, the actual strategy of his response consists not in direct denial of these facts, but rather in claiming that the authors of these reproaches are unable to penetrate the essence of what is going on. and to perceive the emergence of a new man, of classless solidarity. A communist knows very well that millions are dying in the camps, yet this knowledge only confirms his belief that the sublime, true people happily and enthusiastically builds socialism. The more reality is miserable and depressive, the more a true Stalinist communist clings to his fetish.
Okay. So his point is this split between the big other and the superego. Often the way that we reconcile this, so to speak, to ourselves is through fetishist disavowal. And Nance, why don't you tell people what that's all about?
So disavowal is this really cool trick that you can play on yourself, and you take something and rather than just outright denying it, and rather than just saying that's not true, you take it and you manage to defang it. That, and that's why I know very well, but nevertheless, like that is the key operation, the but nevertheless. So it's not a denial. It's not rejecting reality per se. It's taking reality and denaturing reality and making it into a new phantasmatic reality where that's true, but there's a truer truth that you're missing out on. You don't have the secret knowledge. So going back to the real in the real, the fire in the fire, like it's creating what does Alenka say? Like the duplication of space.
Right here.
Yeah. Excellent book.
If you want to know what disavowal is, you can't do better than Alenka Zupancic's book, which we did a short reading of, and we also discussed with her. Look, I mean, look, the way I always like to put it is just disavowal is an acceptance of the truth, while also refusing to live in accordance with it.
Yes.
I know very well that this is the case, but nevertheless, I'm going to act like it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always an operation ideologically. There's the performing that you can say the truth or you can admit to the truth actually supports the disavowal, because you're like, well, yeah, I know that millions of people are dying, but what's really going on?
But nevertheless.
So it's like, it's taking reality, to use that word, and denaturing it and turning it into just data about the world as opposed to a representation of the world. It's doing this like doubling. So it's simulation. I mean, when we read it, we were just like, dude, there's so much Baudrillard going on. Because there's this nature of doubling and simulation.
Right. And so when he talks about the fetishistic disavowal of this guilt, he's saying, look, we are all guilty of engaging in communal forms of inherent transgression that involve obscene forms of enjoyment, but we disavow this to ourselves. Yeah, I know very well I engaged in it, but nevertheless, I'm just a good citizen that's doing what I'm supposed to. And so this is how it works. And it's a strange phenomenon. It's a strange psychical, acrobatic maneuver that we do. But it is how ideology functions. So I don't know. Anything else on this one?
He's using Stalinism as an example, which he's right to do, but I also he uses fascism and racism in the American South a lot to kind of talk about the superego and the obscene underside of the law, and I think that fits right. Like a German in the 1930s could say the same thing that this hypothetical Stalinist is saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Every allegiance to some community eventually involves such a fetish, which functions as the disavowal of its founding crime. It is not America, Is not America the fetish of an infinitely open space enabling every individual to pursue happiness in his or her own way? The nature of this solidarity in guilt can also be much more specific when, for example, the leader is caught with his pants down. The solidarity of the group is strengthened by the subject's common disavowal of the misfortune that laid bare the leader's failure or impotence. A shared lie is an incomparably more effective bond for a group than the truth. Perhaps one should reread Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes along these lines. Of course, everybody knew that the emperor was naked, yet it was precisely the disavowal of this fact that held the subjects together. By stating this reality, the unfortunate child effectively dissolved the social link.
Okay, so it's not exactly clear. Why does disavowing, you know, engaging in a kind of lie in this sense that he's talking about, why does that bond people together? Because there's something transgressive about it. And his point is that it is through acts of transgression that bonds are really forged in a community. And I'm sorry this is true. Like, why do you think so many of us have these lasting bonds with our childhood friends? It's because we did bad shit together. I mean, yes, there's other stuff to it, but that's a part of it. And do you really just feel like, do you have a bond with somebody that you literally just sit around following the rules with? Or do you have a bond with somebody that you get up to no good with? I mean,
Yeah, man. Stand by me. I mean, or I remember my first best friend, and we used to sit around behind the school and like whisper cuss words, like whisper fuck and giggle and shit and and giggle and like that. But that was what we did. That's how we became friends. I
yeah,
don't remember the other kids in the class who we just sat around and did homework and brought apples for the teacher and stuff. Like, no.
no. Um, and you see this, so this example, right? The leader is caught with his pants down. The solidarity of the group is strengthened by the subject's common disavowal of the misfortune that laid bare the leader's failure or impotence. Do we not see this all over the place with Trump?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And maybe it's dwindling a little bit nowadays, but I mean, for the last, you know, since 2016,
Mhm.
any anybody, any Democrat, anybody who pointed out a lack or failure on Trump's part, no, like there was a common bond. Like you're not undermining his power by doing this. You're strengthening his appeal, and the liberal leftists still really haven't learned this lesson properly. Like
Oh
your
yeah.
strategy of pointing out his lack, or at least the way you do it, is not, excuse me, effective.
Yep.
And no, it's like if people have this bond, this over this leader, which especially a leader who is seen to be a transgressive figure, somebody from
Yep.
the outside, somebody who wants to drain the swamp, right? The leader himself is a form of transgression. So pointing out some failure of his, of why he fails to live up to the standards of the law, yeah, it's like, thanks, you just made him more transgressive. You just made him
Yeah.
more libidinally appealing from this perspective. And they don't see how their critiques are cyber positive reinforcement of his appeal.
Yeah. I like that. The cybernetic aspect of it.
Hmm.
It just continues to intensify it. And because all the supporters are doing this disavowal and they're warping reality, not only are they not undermining Trump, they are undermining reality. So people complain about, oh, we live, post-truth world and like, oh, these people are crazy. They live in their own world. It's like, yeah, you played a part in that by continuing to label everyone a deplorable.
Right. No, and I'm sorry, like I'm gonna bring back, mention a book that got canceled, but I always liked it, and I think she made a contribution with it. Kill All Normies, Angela Nagel, right? One of the best parts of it is her showing how transgression functions, in the culture war, but on the right as well. Like, and you see this now. There's this echo where somehow in the 90s, the left got to monopolize transgression. Everybody on the right was a Bible thumper, right?
Yep.
And transgression was associated with the left. Somewhere it got switched, and the left became the shamers and finger pointers and the naggers, and I'm gonna pester you about how blah 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 blah. Well, the right at some point claims ownership, so to speak, of transgression as a political tool, and you see this now, where fucking Nick Fuentes, it's almost like the light went on for him, and he's, oh, Trump is conformist. This is boring. Uh, Watch how transgressive I can be. I'm going to go against Trump.
Yeah.
And you sit there and go, yeah, the same thing that Angela Nagel saw all those years ago is still going on. And it is. I mean, Fuentes is this great example of, I'm going to out transgress everybody else, and that's my politics.
Yeah.
At least that's my apparatus of capture. That's my mechanism of garnering attention.
Yeah.
And it seems to still work on some level. So I'm just saying that this whole thing about politics and identifying with the transgressive figure is still alive and well, and it's going to continue to be a dynamic that we need to be able to understand.
Yep. Cyber positive transgression.
Yes.
And it's just been accelerated and intensified due to our media environment.
And that cyber positive transgression, this term you coined. I mean, aren't the Groypers a perfect example of this?
Absolutely.
You could write a whole thing on that. Like, that's
maybe
the example of it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicki Minaj, and
Cardi B.
I mean, now there's Cardi B. Now there's songs that I actually kind of like, some of them, but they're just, I'm so tired of taking these plan Bs. Like, girls just singing like just crazy songs that I like, and I think some of them are well crafted and there's artistic intention being put into it, but it's just transgression. So like that and the Groypers are like these perfect examples of the cybernetic transgression. And I think, that belongs in our Superego AI book.
Mm-hmm. No, that's
so.
Yeah. I mean, cybernetic transgression is this digital superego.
Yep. I mean, it's the stuff we were talking about with Rampage's kid.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard
anything? Have you gotten an update at all?
I haven't. I feel like we should look it up.
I know, because we talked about it, and then I don't know, guys.
Yeah.
So Rampage Jackson, famous MMA guy, his son had this incident where he was doing a thing with pro wrestling. It went wrong, and he brutally attacked a pro wrestler in the ring and actually beat him half to death. I mean, it's brutal. And he was being filmed. He was streaming it, and he was telling his chat, like, get ready, wait till you're not going to believe what I do next. And the whole thing was like for spectacle value. And I mean, it's just this form of media nihilism.
Yep.
And mass media nihilism. And it's weird. It was such the topic for such an intense moment, and then just poof.
Yep. It was
Nobody
for that
it
week.
Like it didn't happen.
Yeah, for that week. It was I mean, we watched that Cartier Brothers video. It was all the hotness for like a week, and then it kind of faded away.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so I don't know whatever happened to Rampage's kid. I don't know if he caught charges. I mean, I think he had to.
Yeah, I hope he caught charges, and I hope I don't know, they're trying to solve that problem structurally somehow. You know, like I hope it's not just like, oh, put him in jail. Um, like I hope there's real attempts at restorative, you know, justice to, because it's a structural problem. Like this is why it matters. This is why the superego matters. This is why the stuff that we're talking about matters. Because it escalates. The violence and the nihilism and the desperation escalates, and it's infecting the youth. Not to you know, be the cliche old guys, and I don't think we're old yet, but we're also
I had a
kind of
couple
old.
coworkers play some of the music they like for me.
Who was
Have you heard of this rapper? I'm not gonna remember his full name, but Pac-Man.
I have heard of Pac-Man. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I
Yeah,
I had one of them send me the link to the video so I could send it to you later. So get ready.
dude. One of my favorite is BLP Kosher. I fucking love this guy. It's such garbage, dude. But people love him. There's this other guy, Ricky something, and he's actually in Missouri. So when I listen to him, I think about you because he has a few songs about Missouri.
Mhm.
But yeah, music is just garbage, dude. I'm sorry.
Well, now, so it's this weird thing where, you know, I see this on all over where with younger people, Zoomers, or I don't know, I think they're Zoomers, where they make content and you're like, is this ironic or serious? Like, it's not clear if it, or is it both at the same time? And so I guess there's this new rapper that the Zoomers are talking about something slimy, and it's
Haven't heard of
almost as if like the way that my coworker explained it was this guy thinks he's really a good rapper because he has a big following, but he doesn't get that people follow him just to meme him. And they're
Mm,
like pushing him up on SoundCloud or whatever as a meme, but he doesn't get it. And I'm okay, this all that to say this is
dude.
when I feel old.
And also that makes me sad. That is actually sad. Like this one guy is the butt of the joke for a whole generation. That's sad. Even if the guy sucks, like he could be a horrible guy. It's still sad to think like he genuinely thinks he's awesome, and there's millions of kids just making fun of him. That's sad, dude.
I'm not gonna lie though. When I saw a clip of this guy, I mean, what first comes to mind is, oh yeah, I'm not worried about it because this I can't say person. This figure doesn't feel the way I do about things. Like I'm
Right.
not sure if what I think of as human emotions are operative in this situation. So
Yeah.
it's almost like, and I say this, it is sad, right? But it's like, are you just a pure embodiment of the algorithm? Are you
Yeah.
anything like?
Yep.
Is there anything human there? Like I don't.
Dude, that's what so this shit that I've been going on about, which this is inside baseball, but the algorithm membrane. Uh that's like there's a new type of person, and they're not real people. They're algorithm creatures. It's something else entirely. It's like your subjectivity didn't develop properly, and have been fully positivized by the algorithm, and we are not the same. And that may sound mean or a bit extreme, and yes, but I think it is that extreme. Like we are damning the youth, and not we as in you and I, but we as in like humanity as a whole. Like we have damned the next generation, because capital was just like, oh yeah, here, have the internet, have free reign over the internet, go ahead and colonize everybody's minds, go ahead, don't worry about it. And now we have to reckon with the consequences of that. And that's why superego matters. Like you can't reckon with that if you don't understand how all this stuff works.
Well, look, I mean, sorry, you're getting more political strategy here from Zizek in this chapter than you're going to get from your favorite talking
Yep.
head political analyst on YouTube. Sorry. And this right here, this insight, hey, like, let me put it in common terms. Like Slavoj would say, look, guys, if there's a political figure that you fundamentally disagree with and you want to, undermine this person's credibility, the last thing you can do to be effective here is to morally shame the people who like him and try to point out each and every one of his failures and mock him for this. It only intensifies the libidinal bond between the followers and the leader. And so you're undermining your own, this is your death drive, that you're undermining what you're actually seeking to accomplish here. And so there's a lot of people who still think that shaming Trump supporters
Yeah.
is going to do something. And you, at this point, you sit there and go, yeah, we're going to try something else.
Yep. Prohibition eroticizes.
That's it. Prohibition eroticizes. And if you have identified with a figure who is a figure of transgression, trying to prohibit that figure of transgression makes him all the more transgressive appearing. So
Yep.
it's not the way to do it. The much better thing is to show, how look at all the ways that this is just somebody who's just a total product of the system.
Yep.
And but no, I mean, what was the famous thing Trump said? Like he could shoot somebody in the street and people would still
still love him.
and he
People would-
wasn't wrong.
No.
And
Well, I mean, perfect example is QAnon. 8 months ago, they had all the smoke for the cabal, and now that there's gray area, was Trump in the files? Was he not? This and that. QAnon, Pizzagate, you don't hear those people saying any.
because here's the thing. When it comes to the type of stuff that's in the files, there are certain things that people will break their libidinal bond, their transference with. And they think, oh, he did that to children, or he did. No, they will. That's the kind of stuff that can actually break the hold.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't even say it's a disavowal. I would say it's flat out denial. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to even accept those are facts. I can't do it. And so Alenka is great. I mean, because Slavoj here, I mean, this is getting technical, but here's where we're at. So where did he just use the word? He just used, okay, look, so the actual strategy of his response consists not in a direct denial of these facts, but rather in claiming that the authors of these reproaches are unable to penetrate to the blah, blah, blah. The point is, disavowal is not denial. And the Ljubljana school, Slavoj Žižek, Alenka Zupančić, Mladen Dolar, they're always emphasizing this distinction. Disavow accepts the facts and then doesn't live in accordance with them. Denial can't even embrace the facts as facts.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened with QAnon.
Yep. Well, and I think, I mean, I think it was largely intentional to flood everything with unverifiable stuff. They're just like, just put as much out as we can so people don't know what is verifiable truth and what is fake, made up AI, fake news nonsense. Like, I think that was
Sorry, but Trump
strategic.
incriminated himself with the redactions, and his own people felt that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, and that's why it does seem to be slipping. It definitely does
more
seem
than it
to be
ever
slipping.
has. And
Yeah.
not because of anything the Democrats have been able to pull off, because of Trump himself.
Yeah. No, I think it's in spite of the Democrats.
Right.
that all this is
almost,
happening.
yeah,
But
it's almost like, damn, Trump, like you actually had to do what the Democrats themselves tried for
what
10
they
years and
couldn't
couldn't do.
do. Yeah, dude.
Nobody can cancel me except me. Watch, I'll show you how it's done. Like,
Yep. That's exactly what happened.
so Slavoj is explaining why the allure of the transgressive political figure. I think Slavoj has this figured out, and of course, people like Todd McGowan have developed it further. Russ Sprigley have, all of us who are inspired by Žižek take this and develop it in our own ways. But um, yeah, because here's the thing, I don't know of any other theory that does as good a job of explaining this kind of stuff, making sense of it.
Yeah.
Like why does a transgressive political figure gain allure when somebody points out a mistake they made? Like, it's, people go, I don't know, but I think Slavoj has this better figured out than anybody else.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, okay. Let's get into the next part.
This paradox of solidarity and guilt, however, is far from holding true only for totalitarian communities. Suffice it to recall today's progressive cultural critique communities. Is not their founding gesture a fetishizing elevation of an author? Typical candidates: Alfred Hitchcock, Jane Austen, Virginia Woolf, and so on. All of whose politically incorrect misdeeds are pardoned in advance or reinterpreted as subversive progressive in an unheard of hidden way. The community's enjoyment is provided by this very collective disavowal. For example, by our insistence on the progressive character of Hitchcock, which suspends the symbolic efficiency of what obviously does not enter this frame.
So basically, I know very well that Hitchcock was backwards in certain ways, but nevertheless,
Yeah.
I'm going to spin a narrative about how there's a secret kernel of progressivism, operating in the background of his films and blah, 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 right? And the people who do this, it's a solidarity and guilt because you're misrepresenting, you're transgressing, you're doing something you ought not to do. And this, the way you interpret Hitchcock and his significance is not on the level of what the Ku Klux Klan did, but formally, at the structural level, it's still, there's a form of transgression that bonds a community together. And that's the whole point. Like, yeah, if that's the case and it's inescapable, then we certainly want better forms of transgression than others.
Yeah.
We want the Hitchcock interpreter's form of transgression and not the KKK's. But nevertheless, the same mechanism is operative in both cases. One's just far more violent and extreme than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, and why I like he goes to an example like this, because this is a much more mundane example. And the KKK is this extreme example, right? Okay, how does it work for people in their day-to-day lives? Well, there's forms of inherent transgression at your workplace, or whatever you do, you go golfing with your buddies, and you get drunk and you get loud and obnoxious. Yeah, that's not the worst thing in the world, but it is kind of
it's the same logic. It's the same structure. It's showing how it operates, and it's also demonstrating that it does hold up. Like, no, this is working, and I'll show you how. I'll point out to any example and show you how it's working.
And look, if we want to tie it to Bataille, you can say in every human situation there's excess energy circulating, and there has to be some kind of outlet. And Bataille and Accursed Share show these different forms. So the Aztecs have their ritualistic sacrifice, and that's one way of, hitting the pressure release valve.
Yeah.
On this, great intensity. Potlatch is one, and then military enterprise.
The lauding of Hitchcock is also an expression of the Accursed Share. Like, yeah, The accursed share is this logic of the inherent transgression actually being the site of cohesion. Like rather than you would think, oh, well, those people that are breaking the rules, they're the bad, no good Nicks. And it's like, no, seeing it this way actually shows that this is the very site of cohesion. Because we transgress in this one pre-approved way, all the other boundaries hold up.
Yep. I mean, let's see. Yeah, I think we're good on that paragraph. Unless you got anything.
I think that's it. In this respect, we are ultimately doing the same thing as the Western Stalinist communist who, in the 1930s, faithfully followed the reversals of the party line and first saw the main enemy in fascism, then changed into an engaged pacifist enthusiastically supporting the Soviet-German pact and warning against English or French militarism, and ended by calling for a common front of all progressive forces, communists and bourgeois Democrats, against fascism. Far from putting him to much trouble, these reversals only confirmed him in his communist creed. Or, as Jean-Claude Milner put it, perhaps the principal function of the master is to set down the lie that can sustain group solidarity, to surprise the subjects with statements that manifestly contradict facts, to claim, again and again, that black is white. Consequently, it is not sufficient to say my country, right or wrong. My country is truly mine, only insofar as at a certain crucial point it is wrong.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about a direct lie or a subtle distortion of the truth or a nuanced form of manipulation. All of these are transgressive or forbidden, prohibited. And again, that's why they knit together the community. Prohibition eroticizes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's this sexual component to it. It's sexual in the broad sense.
Yep.
Having to do with like the consumption of libidinal energy. Um, and yeah, I think this is right. And I think you find it in any community, in any, social group, any clique, right? You find that there's some kind of inappropriate joking
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, teasing or
Yep.
bullying. Like, yeah, and there's this weird collective logic to these obscenities and why they ground group identity. And that's it. So if people think group identity is just what the group would officially say about itself, how it would publicly represent itself, you're not seeing the glue that actually holds it together.
This tension between the public law and its obscene superego underside also enables us to approach Althusser's notion of ideological interpellation in a new way. The Althusserian theory of ideological state apparatuses and ideological interpellation is more complex than it may appear. When Althusser repeats after Pascal, act as if you believe, pray, kneel down, and you shall believe, faith will arrive by itself. He delineates an intricate reflexive mechanism of retroactive autopoietic foundation that far exceeds the reductionist assertion of inner beliefs' dependence on external behavior. That is to say, the implicit logic of his argument is kneel down and you shall believe that you knelt down because of your belief. That is, that you're following the ritual as an expression, effect of your inner belief. In short, the external ritual performatively generates its own ideological foundation. Herein resides the interconnection of the ritual that pertains to ideological state apparatuses and of the act of interpellation. When I believe that I knelt down because of my belief, I simultaneously recognize myself in the call of the other God who dictated that I kneel down.
Okay. So, look, this is one of these moments you and I read that and we go, yep, no problem. But it's against years of wrestling with this. So, hi, viewer who's new to all this and has no idea what you just heard Nance read. We're going to unpack it for you, right? We're going to go bit by bit, part by part. And because this is Žižekian theory at its core. And
Yep.
there's sometimes he talks about belief in interviews or what, but you're not getting it like here. So look, ultimately Žižek has a very unique theory of belief. And it's a combination of Lacan, it's a combination of this thing with fetishist disavowal. He gets it from this guy. I don't know how close I am to a proper pronunciation, so forgive me, American here. Octave Menani, who he's the guy who came up with this formula of fetishist disavowal. I know very well, but nevertheless. Now here's what we haven't said so far. The nevertheless, that's the belief part. I know very well, but nevertheless, I'm going to believe as if, right?
Yep.
So this is fetishist disavowal has this friction between knowledge and belief. Because for Žižek, belief is action. And just because you abstractly sit back and say, I believe I am a Christian. Okay, you can say that and you can think that, but you don't really have the belief unless you act in accordance with that. Like, are you acting as a Christian? Then you're not really a Christian. Now, it's interesting this mechanism of how belief actually takes hold that he's describing here. Okay. Because it's like, do you have a belief or not? So look, this whole thing with beliefs with Žižek, it involves the Lacanian concept of the big other. It involves Octave Menoni's concept of fetishist disavowal, and it also is inspired by Robert Fowler's work, especially his idea of beliefs without believers, right? Or beliefs that no one themselves actually believe. Now, how does this all work? So, how can there be a belief without believers? Well, because what the point is, you can have a belief that functions in a society, even if no specific members actually have a first person belief or commitment in the belief. Here's what they believe. They believe that other people have a belief in this belief. Now, in truth, really the only person who believes it is the big other itself. And then even that's questionable. But the idea is you can have a circuit of belief that functions even if nobody has a first person belief, because people believe that others believe it. And so they have to pretend to go along with it, even though they themselves don't truly believe it. But that's how the belief, an impersonal belief, actually functions in persons' lives, right? Okay. So you can have beliefs without believers because you take others to believe it and you think that that's ultimately rooted in what they take the big other to be saying authoritatively. And you disavow this. I know very well that this belief is bullshit, but nevertheless, I'm going to go along with it, even though I'm not going to first person believe it, because I believe other people. It's this kind of weird. Like I say, it's cognitive acrobats we pull, right? And it completely has to do with how ideology functions for us, where an ideology can function even if nobody has first person commitments to it. So if you're in a community that claims to be Christian, the Christian belief system could be operative there and nobody's actually a Christian. And it's because they believe other people believe it, and so they pretend to go along with it. I think this is what Kierkegaard has in mind with his critique of the Danish state church, right? He didn't put it in these Žižekian terms, but it coalesces, I think. So the weird function of all this is retroactivity. So why don't you tell people what retroactivity is all about?
So, first of all, an example of this kind of belief without a believer is you go into a church and you won't raise your voice. You wouldn't run into a church and take your shirt off and run around and scream, "Hail Satan," because it would just it would feel weird. Or even a government building or a library, there's a reverence to the space, and that's an example of this belief without
Even
an
if you
active
don't
believer.
consciously sit there having reverence for the space.
Yeah, when I go into a church, I try to be as respectful as I can be, because there's a gravity, there's a weight, there's a character or personality to the building.
It's how you interpret how the church relates to the other.
Yeah. So the meaning behind that is retroactively kind of quilted, because I can go in and think I'm choosing to be respectful because I'm just a good respectful boy, and I mind my manners and this and that. But retroactively, that kicks into ideology gear, because I realize no, I don't have an active belief in God or Jesus. I don't have an active belief that God can see me and I have to take my hat off my head or whatever. It's not mine. It's not my belief. It's not something that I'm actively taking up. But because it's this social thing that I am playing along with, or that I'm doing as one does when in Rome, act as the Romans do, it is quilted into this cultural Christianity or whatever that I belong to. Even though I deny that. I say no, and I don't think it's cultural Christianity as much as it is cultural capitalism coded as Christianity. But
you act in accordance with Christian belief, even though you yourself don't have Christian beliefs.
So it takes up that meaning. It gets coded in that way. I'm actually submitting to, I think in the moment, I am being agential and I am making this choice. But what's really going on is that I am submitting to the big other in this way. I am submitting to the social order. I am agreeing to play along. And that happens after the fact. Or, it's not that it literally happens when I leave the building, then it all kicks in. But it's this thing where I think I'm doing one thing, or I can profess that I'm doing one thing, but my behavior, what I'm actually performing, that's where the meaning gets coded into the action. So it's just like you act in accordance with whatever you believe, regardless of what you claim to believe. It doesn't matter what you profess or proclaim, it's what you perform. And not in this, I need to be loud, conspicuous, spectacle type of performance, but perform as in your behavior. Your behavior tells the truth about you and the society and your relation to the society, regardless of what you would claim about yourself.
So look, I think that's good. Let's talk about this reference to Pascal before we move on. So what Althusser and Pascal basically argue is that if you repeat a patterned set of behaviors, you're going to retroactively establish the belief that you take as the foundation for repetitious pattern behavior in this way. So if you do what a Christian does, even if you don't currently have first person Christian beliefs, The idea is that the repetitious action itself basically installs the Christian belief in your unconscious, so to speak. It's interesting here because the occult, I wrote about this in my book. The occult has a mechanism that's similar to this called sigils. And you you create an image, right? And you focus on it and you perform rituals with it. And the idea is that the sigil will work its way into your unconscious. Well, that's what Althusser and Pascal, in their own ways, are talking about. So it's funny, you have to fake it till you make it. But what is the it here? You have to fake the belief in order to make the belief. And that is this core thing that Žižek understands, that if you can get people to engage in certain pattern behavior, the belief will follow after the fact. But once the belief has been installed, it retroactively appears to be the foundation of all the action. And so,
What did he say here? The autopoetic, the mechanism, the reflexive
great-
mechanism of retroactive autopoetic foundation. So that's the
I love that kind of stuff. I know that
yeah.
we lose certain normies with that kind, but I'm like, that's great. It's
yeah,
almost Landian condensation, very
Well, I mean,
condensed
just-
writing, you know.
the reflexive mechanism, like that already. So reflexive, it's telling you that it's this thing that you're at odds, there's a tension, and so it's kind of folding back on itself. Retroactive means that it comes back and it's overcoded. Autopoetic means the thing that posits itself, the thing that creates itself. Foundation. So like it's this thing that can only be understood in this Žižekian way. Like it's always this retroactive tautological thing.
The point is, this is this weird thing with time, and this is one way that Slavoj Žižek and Nick Land are very close, is they both emphasize retrochronic temporality or retrochronicity or retroactivity. We could also talk about retroversion here, but the point is somehow the past is in the future. And Lacan, his famous example of this is every sentence works like this. So
He caressed
the way
her
you
face.
end a sentence determines the meaning of what was said prior to that. So the last part of a sentence is called the quilting point. And it's a quilting point because it anchors or fixes the meaning of everything that came before it, right? I mean, the funny thing is, you can use that little silly example. If I tell somebody, hey, you're my best friend, right? It seems like the best friend and then the pause, which implies a period, right? Seems like it's quilted. But then you throw the psych, right? That we used to do in the 90s as kids, right? And then that requilts the quilting point, and it's like it means the opposite thing. And all you did was add one word. And so this is going on. Like a sentence itself is a time traveler.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's operating at the level of just, propositions or general statements, this is happening at the level of institutions, of the movement and development of our symbolic orders. It's happening all over the place. And, Immanuel Kant, in Critique of Pure Reason, he would argue, look, our default setting, and I agree with this, our default way of experiencing the world is to structure it in linear terms. And he's right. We do that. Linear temporality is the default setting for us. And it's precisely because it is the default setting and how we organize our experience. That's why we miss retroactivity so much, right?
Mhm.
It requires standing back from our default linearity to be able to start to perceive that retroactivity is all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the weird thing about how a belief comes to take hold in a person is that it involves this weird retrochronic establishment, this retroactivity, where the effect preceded the cause. And it sounds fucking weird. But the effects, meaning the actions that are said to spring from the belief, come first and then retroactively caused their very cause, which is the first person belief. So
Yeah.
his point here is just to try to show how a belief is actually produced. And most people get it backwards. They think, oh, a person has a belief, and then they start to act in accordance with it. Wrong.
Yeah.
And so people can go, okay, but what's the point? Well, here's the point. The point is if you can structure a situation where people have to engage in certain activities, there's a high probability that they're going to come to believe in those actions, even if they're repressive, even if they work against the interest of the people engaged in it. Is this not absolutely true of wage labor?
Yep. Well, and then
Force
and
people into
start
this,
to
and then they come to think, oh, actually, I believe in
this is the truth of who I am. Look at me. I have such a strong essence. I'm such a good worker.
I'm not like those shitty
And
workers that.
I mean, it's when we read that bit from Nietzsche and we talked about it, we were talking about the Protestant work ethic. How there's a part I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't like it. I hate it. But there's also a part of me that can never escape the desire to show a good work ethic. Like it's like there's just a part of me that's trapped in that black iron prison of like having a good work ethic means I'm a good person in some kind of way. Like I know intellectually, I know that's not true. But it's just so deep down inside me that I can't escape it.
But here's how you can also become an atheist towards your own beliefs, right? Or at least move in that direction. Is if Slavoj is pointing out, you start going, oh wait, they literally made me believe this. Like, fake it till you make it. Fake the belief until you make the belief. They made the belief in me by forcing me to engage in these repetitious, patterned activities, rituals. They don't seem ritualistic because we think of rituals in a very gaudy type of way. But there's a ritualistic dimension to wage labor.
Yep.
It involves sacrifice. You get up, you're not following your own will, you're following the will of the other, which you could say is God. It's not, but And so there's a complete ritualistic thing to it. And so instead of beliefs causing rituals, rituals cause beliefs.
Yep.
And once you realize that you were against your will forced through a ritual factory, a ritual machine, you start to be able to go, okay, yeah, I still have residual belief in the belief, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's on shaky ground.
Yeah. It doesn't determine. It used to be determinative, and now it's like, no, it conditions. It doesn't determine.
You catch yourself going, wait a second.
Yeah. Why am I doing it this way?
So
well, and there's also a certain joy that comes from transgressing the work ethic. Like sometimes at work, you sit around and do nothing, and that's a good thing.
But it's also funny, that's doing nothing becomes this weird thing that's approved by workers who consider themselves and each other to be the hard workers. If you get to be classified as one of the hard workers, then you have permission to do as little as possible. It's such a weird fucking thing. But if they categorize you as a lazy worker, you can't have an extra minute on your fucking lunch break without them like giving you shit. And it's all fuckery. It's like everybody wants to be a lazy fucking worker. Even the hard workers. The hard workers work hard so they can be lazy.
Yep.
And get away with it and be accepted in the laziness. And what pisses the hard workers off is they're looking at the lazy workers going, you dipshits don't understand how to actually be lazy workers.
Yep.
You have to mediate it through this one step. You have to work hard the first 3 months you're there, and then you've been hazed in a sense. You've performed the initiation ritual. Now you're part of the in group, and you can sit around and do whatever. It's fucking bullshit. But this
Yeah.
is what human beings do.
All right.
Okay, before we go on, because we're going to get into this thing with Althusser, let me just do this now. All right.
Hmm.
Interpellation. What the fuck does this mean? This word mean? Well, it's primarily associated with the work of Louis Althusser, who is a French Marxist, structuralist Marxist, and very, very influential. Not gonna lie, his work has never captivated me the way it does others, and I'm very much rooted in the Marxist tradition, but I would have never said at any point that I'm an Althusserian. Uh, Always found him making interesting points, and some of them, I continue to think with. Of course, this whole thing with his theory of interpolation, I think if you're interested in ideology, you have to at least read his essay on ideological state apparatuses. It's just required reading. But for me, Milan Delar, in his essay Beyond Interpolation, which really influenced Zizek, um, and then Zizek's own way of taking Delar's insights and developing them, it is one of those things where it's decisive. Like, sorry, Althusser, Delar and Zizek are right. You're wrong. Like, and most of the time in philosophy, things like this don't feel that way. They're still living questions. But for me, what Delar and Zizek do with interpolation, I could never be a traditional Althusserian after this. Um, Essentially, interpolation has to do when you are hailed by an authority figure. And he's going to get into it in a second, but it's the hey you, right? And if you acknowledge that and you turn around and you're like, "Oh, I've been addressed." And I not just by another little other like me, another little ego, but by the big other, the social authority, you become the subject. And subject here, like, you allow yourself to be ruled over by this hailing authority figure. And the point is, this is this moment of symbolic identification. Okay, imaginary identification is when you're with somebody, you met them, and you're starting to hang out, and you're a giant fan of Bone Thugs and Harmony, and this person you just met that you started to hang out with, you say, hey, play whatever you want, and they put on Bone, and you're like, oh my god, I love you, right? You identify with them just on the basis of they like what I like. They like the cool stuff I like, right? Okay, fine. But that's what we call imaginary identification. It just has to do with ego preferences and the way you identify with another ego, right? Symbolic identification means I identify with a value or a set of values or a principle, or I identify with this authority figure having authority over me. The different type of identification. And Althusser understands both of these, but he doesn't. He understands the Lacanian imaginary and the Lacanian symbolic. He doesn't understand the real. And that is his huge failure as a theorist of ideology. And that's what Delar and Žižek get. So, interpolation just means being addressed by an authority figure and submitting to that authority. Basically, and to make it concrete, say that you're a child and there comes this moment, you're in a traditional Christian society, and there comes a moment where your father doesn't just act like a person. He's speaking on behalf of his ideology, and he interpolates you, and essentially he says you're going to be a Christian, right? he installs a symbolic mandate that now you have to live up to, or try to live up to, that you have to act in accordance with, and that is an act of interpolation.
Things are even more complex in the case of interpolation. Althusser's example contains more than his own theorization gets out of it. Althusser evokes an individual who, while carelessly walking down the street, is suddenly addressed by a policeman. Hey, you there. By answering the call, that is, by stopping and turning around towards the policeman, the individual constitutes himself as the subject of power, of the big other subject, ideology. Transforms the individuals
Okay,
into
just for clarity's sake, what Nance is about to read is Althusser himself.
ideology transforms the individuals into subjects. It transforms them all by that very precise operation, which I have called interpolation or hailing, and which can be imagined along the lines of the most commonplace everyday police or other hailing, hey, you there. Assuming that the theoretical scene I have imagined takes place in the street, the hailed individual will turn around. By this mere 180-degree physical conversion, he becomes a subject. Why? Because he has recognized that the hail was really addressed to him, and that it was really him who was hailed and not someone else. Experience shows that the practical transmission of hailings is such that they hardly ever miss their man. Verbal call or whistle, the one hailed always recognizes that it is really him who is being hailed. And yet, it is a strange phenomenon, and one which cannot be explained solely by guilt feelings, despite the large numbers who have something on their consciences. Naturally, for the convenience and clarity of my little theoretical theater, I have had to present things in the form of a sequence, with a before and an after, and thus in the form of a temporal succession. There are individuals walking along. Somewhere, usually behind them, the hail rings out. Hey, you there. One individual, 9 times out of 10, it is the right one, turns around, believing, suspecting, knowing that it is for him, or recognizing that it really is he who is meant by the hailing. But in reality, these things happen without any succession. The existence of ideology and the hailing or interpolation of individuals as subjects are one and the same thing.
Okay. You want to share your thoughts on it? Like, what comes to mind for you in how he describes this act of interpolation?
Um, I mean, the fact that he's explaining it or laying it out with this succession, but then he makes the point to come back and say this is not a successive thing. Like, this is a moment.
And this example, he says it's theater. He's not saying this is how it actually looks or happens.
Right.
He's
right.
using it to dramatize how we submit ourselves to authority.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I think it's probably pretty common to imagine moments where, I mean, there have been times, there's always the, hey, you hear the hey and you turn around. Like that's happened to me so many times. You hear, hey, or hey, you, or stop, or whatever.
Yes. And those are all other ways of articulating the same hailing.
Yeah. And it does seem to be a bit uncanny that it often works. Someone shouts to get your attention, and
you
they
feel a
get
strong
your
sense
attention.
of obligation.
Yeah. I mean, we
And
used
it's not guilt.
fuck with
He's right to say it's not necessarily guilt feelings. It's like, oh shit, what?
yeah, yeah. We used to fuck with people. Me and my homies. When we'd be out and about, and if we saw somebody walking by, we'd be like, "Hey, that's him. That's the guy." Like just just to fuck with people, and it's really mean spirited. Um,
Well, you
but
could
yeah,
pretend to be a
often,
cop. You could just shout, "Stop right there."
yeah. Uh, but it's weird. Like it's almost eerie. It's almost uncanny that there does seem to be this mechanism of yes, they really are talking about me. They really are trying to get my attention.
Also, isn't it weird? Is this not? Here's phenomenologically speaking. I think he's getting at something interesting, which this type of moment is this not where it does seem like the law itself has a voice, where it's not
yeah.
another person. The if I'm sitting there and I really can get myself to realize, oh, some average dipshit just said that to me. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
But that's not how it feels. That is not the experience. It's like the law itself has a voice.
I am the law.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this depersonalized, the voice without a mouth.
It is. It's this partial object, this free floating. It's
Yep.
like a voice that doesn't have a body, even though, yeah, of course, we know that vocal cords and it's attached to this person, but that's not how we experience it.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, he's right to point this out as, I mean, it's the best example that could, you know, be staged in his theory theater. But
Mhm.
no, but this moment happens when a parent or an authority figure
Yep.
addresses you from the position of authority itself and not as another person. And yeah, it's a weird thing where I know you can have the strongest, most rebellious type of personality, but even they're susceptible to this shit in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
They straighten up, they walk differently. It's like fuck, I better not fuck around right
Or
now.
yeah, or you preempt it by I don't know, going to I remember one time I was really stoned and I was in junior high and we had a play. We were doing a Midsummer Night's Dream. And I was playing Puck.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. Uh, and I was really, really, really stoned. And it like too stoned. It was a mistake. It was horrible. It was catastrophic.
I so wish there was footage
Um,
of this.
I'm sure there is on a VX on mini VHS. I'm sure there is somewhere out there. Shout out anybody in the Phoenix area. Let us know if you have that on footage. But walking into the cafeteria, the gymnasium cafeteria. America has multi-purpose, so it's the cafeteria, it's the gym, it's all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But walking in, like I preempted the authority by standing up a little straighter and putting Visine in my eyes and spraying on Adidas fucking Moves cologne and like trying to do all the things properly to avoid detection by the law. Like that was preempting this moment of interpellation.
Okay, look, going back to your example of how you carry yourself while at church, right? Okay, I'll give you an example, and I'm not going to even cuss. Just imagine me being in a church and me doing this. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. And what
Yeah.
exactly wrong or immoral did I just do? Nothing. It's not, I didn't do anything that the Bible prohibits, but that is not how one comports oneself in church. The voice is too loud. There's a bit too much aggressiveness in the tone of my voice and in my facial expression and in my hand gesture. It's too energetic, and Christians tend to be very meek in their dispositions and very, you know, and there's these nuanced subtleties to bodily comportment, and it's no different than if you see a cop and you change, or if you see your boss at work and you adjust.
You straighten up.
It's you
Yeah.
code switch, but you do it with your
Yeah.
body.
Oh, codes. Yeah, that's what it is. It's code switching. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And your body does it for you.
Yep. So that's this
Excuse me.
that is this operation of interpolation, but it's even coming before the hail. It's
Right.
we're preempting. We are
Mhm.
preempting our subjectivization. So we're doing it to ourselves.
So okay, what happens for Althusser is that he has this kind of mythological figure of the individual. There's just this proto individual going about it, doing what it does, but it's not a subject of ideology proper. It doesn't walk around under the dictates of a symbolic mandate, right? And so the individual, this is why it's theater and it's just an example, because you're like, where exactly is this individual at in society? Who hasn't been interpolated that's just walking
Yeah.
around? Okay. The best example is the pre-socialized child, right? You get that this is what symbolic castration is for Lacan, right? This happens what we're calling interpolation happens very early for Lacan. It's not this thing like, oh, I'm a 20-year-old and I'm walking around in the streets and a cop yells at me and I'm finally an interpolated subject. Like,
I'm a wild man.
although that
I'm
maybe
like,
is what's going on with the Zoomers at this point. So
dude, actually, I think there's gas in that tank. It is a failed interpolation. These algorithm
they
creatures.
actually haven't been symbolically castrated.
I think that's it.
Arrested development. There should be a show about that. But no, it is this weird thing where Althusser's example is about this like adult individual, and for Lacan it's like, but this shit happens, when somebody's 2 or 3 years old. So there's that. But the point, however, is that here's what you got. Now, okay, hold on. Just to put a little bit of philosophical nuance on this, right? Okay, hold on. So Kierkegaard might argue that the aesthete is this type of individual that's just kind of drifting around, and until they make the existential dialectical leap into the ethical, they're not okay. But I don't think that's how Althusser is actually. I'm just trying to steel man Althusser for a minute. Other than that, I think he's just trying to explain the virtual mechanism of how we become ideological subjects. And again, I think it happens much earlier than his example would lead one to believe. Whatever. Here's the thing, and this is where Slavoj is going to differ. We'll get into it as we go along. But for Althusser, you're either this pre-ideological individual, which is kind of like the raw materials that can go into making an ideological symbolic subject, right? You're either an individual or you're a symbolic subject. And that's what you're reducible to. And that's not what Slavoj is going to say we're reducible to. And that's where we're going to get into a different ontology as we move along, one rooted in Lacan. So
the first thing that strikes the eye in the passage is Althusser's implicit reference to Lacan's thesis on a letter that always arrives at its destination. The interpellative letter cannot miss its addressee, since, on account of its timeless character, it is only the addressee's recognition, acceptance, that constitutes it as a letter. The crucial feature of the quoted passage, however, is the double denial at work in it. The denial of the explanation of interpellative recognition by means of a guilt feeling, as well as the denial of the temporality of the process of interpellation. Strictly speaking, individuals do not become subjects, they always already are subjects. This double denial is to be read as a Freudian denial. What the timeless character of interpellation renders invisible is a kind of atemporal sequentiality that is far more complex than the theoretical theater staged by Althusser on behalf of the suspicious alibi of convenience and clarity.
Okay, so here's an issue. This is where Slavoj doesn't connect the dots for you. Okay, Althusser's theory theater, right? This staging of interpellation, does it not work in accordance with linear temporality? You're going along as an individual. The big other, the social authority, hails you. This you then respond to it as accepting that you are the one being addressed, and you submit yourself to the authority, and then you become a subject of that interpellation. It's all linear. What did Slavoj just say about Pascal and even Althusser? He wants to read retroactivity into this, and he thinks that they don't see it. Like, that's what he's pointing out here, is that Althusser doesn't get the complexity of the temporal dynamics at play in the generation of an interpellated subject. And so that it's not just linear, it's also retroactive, and we have to factor that in explicitly.
This repressed sequence concerns a guilt feeling of a purely formal, non pathological, in the Kantian sense, nature. A guilt which, for that very reason, weighs most heavily upon those individuals who have nothing on their consciences. That is to say, in what precisely consists the individual's first reaction to the policeman's, "Hey, you there?" In an inconsistent mixture of two elements. One, why me? What does the policeman want from me? I'm innocent. I was just minding my own business and strolling around. However, this perplexed protestation of innocence is always accompanied by, two, an indeterminate Kafkaesque feeling of abstract guilt, a feeling that, in the eyes of power, I am a priori terribly guilty of something, although it is not possible for me to know what precisely I am guilty of, and for that reason, since I don't know what I'm guilty of, I am even more guilty, or more pointedly, it is in this very ignorance of mine that my true guilt consists.
Okay.
What we have here.
Well, actually, let's hold up there. So, okay, here's a question. Let's see. Can you hear me? I think that's good.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, this feeling of generalized guilt. I don't know why I'm guilty, but I nevertheless know I'm guilty. I feel I'm guilty. What am I guilty of? I don't fucking know, but I'm guilty of some essential thing. And so the question is, why do we walk around feeling this guilt, and not over this or that bad action, but guilt as such? Lacanian psychoanalysis, Freudian psychoanalysis, they have the answer to this. It's because in submitting to social authority early on and accepting that we cannot do whatever we want, however we want, whenever we want, that is, in accepting symbolic castration, We have compromised our jouissance. We have compromised ourselves in what we think we have lost. And we think this, and again, we think all of this is unconscious. That's why it seems like I feel guilty, but I don't know what it's about. People don't remember doing this, but it stays with them all the way up into adulthood. And you submitted to an authority that forced you to do something you didn't want to do. And it's hard to articulate. What does it even mean to enjoy in this sense that gets repressed? Jouissance is what has to be sacrificed in order to become a social subject. And it's also precisely this thing that constantly operates in our lives as social subjects. It's all perplexing. But the point is, you feel like by submitting to language, submitting to authority, submitting to institutional practices, that you have compromised the pure thisness of yourself, the wholeness of your being, by letting some other intrude upon your being and structure it and reconfigure it in its own image and likeness, the big other, right? So that's why we have this pervasive sense of guilt as such that we can't really explain, but it's always there. And any social authority can always trigger it because we always have this lingering sense of universal guilt or guilty by default.
I like that. Guilty by default.
Now, hold on, because I want to make sure. Yeah, I think that gets at the guilt thing. I almost. Yeah, okay. I mean, there's more we could unpack, but I don't want to get lost in that. And I think the next paragraph is incredibly important.
All right. What we have here is thus the entire Lacanian structure of the subject split between innocence and abstract, indeterminate guilt. Confronted with a non transparent call emanating from the other, hey, you there. A call where it is not clear to the subject what the other actually wants from him. K-boy. In short, what we encounter here is interpellation prior to identification, prior to the recognition in the call of the other by means of which the individual constitutes himself as always already subject. We are obliged to acknowledge this timeless instant of the impasse in which innocence coincides with indeterminate guilt. The ideological intensification by means of which I assume a symbolic mandate and recognize myself as the subject of power takes place only as an answer to this impasse.
So, okay, here's what's going on here. In this moment, this gap where you're split between innocence and guilt, you're sitting there going, I'm innocent. I haven't done anything fucking wrong. Fuck you. Don't fucking bother me. Don't address me. Don't hail me. I haven't done shit. At the same time, you're like, I've done something. I don't know what, but I also, I know I'm guilty. It's both at the same time. And because of this, right? Because this feeling of fuck authority, I didn't do shit wrong. Don't fucking talk to me like that. And, oh God, did I offend you? What did I do? How can I make it right? Okay. His point is, this is where you have this split subject that is not reducible to the interpellated subject.
Yeah.
All right. And on top of that, this whole thing with K-Voy, which means you're telling me to do this, but what do you really want? Okay. K-Voy has content packed inside it that he doesn't bring out here, and I wish he had, because it would make this clear. So when it comes to social authority, what happens is this. Social authority will demand something of you. Call it a symbolic mandate. It will say, do this, be this, right? But here's what you find out, that no matter how you try, no matter how much you try, it seems like you trying to fulfill that mandate isn't really what the authority wants. And there's this mysterious dimension above and beyond the demand that is the desire of the other. And it is like a black box. And you're sitting there going, okay, so wait a second. If I want to actually submit to you, you're telling me the demand, but that doesn't actually seem like what you really want. So do I do this other thing and try to figure that out? And the point is, you can't just make a pure subject of ideology in the Althusserian sense, a pure interpolated subject that simply is, I am a subject that submits myself to the demand of the authority. No, because the authority itself is split. Remember big other superego? That friction's always already there in the antagonism between the two personifications of the law. And so any authority that addresses you or hails you, you're going to start to immediately tell that they're demanding this of me, but they seem to want something else. That means that you cannot have a one-to-one relationship here. There's division in the other and there's division in the subject. And that means that sometimes, often, if you really want to please the other, you have to figure out what they want, not what they demand.
Mhm.
That means you go against the demand in order to actually serve the other. But it's precisely in submitting to the demand that that's what the other is demanding. Point is, these fault lines within the other and in the subject prevent A equals A. I'm not just a symbolic subject. You are not just a symbolic authority. We are cut intrinsically, internally within ourselves, and it prevents us from ever being fully identical to these roles. That means that there's going to be an excess of whatever we are, whether you want to call it consciousness, is not the term he uses, but consciousness or subjectivity. There's some dimension of yourself that is not reducible to your symbolic identity given to you by the other. And that means that you, in your very ontology, can never just be reducible to a subject of ideology. And that's why you're free. And that's why you can undermine this identity from within yourself. And the greatest insight I can provide on just making this clear to everybody, just go, okay, if you think that you can just be absolutely identical with your symbolic mandate, fine. Just go be a perfect Christian and never get it wrong. Oh, you're going to find that you can't. Go be a perfect Buddhist. Go be a perfect Republican. Go be a perfect Democrat. Oh, you're not going to. And it's because that these symbolic mandates or social identities are not anything that you as a human being can ever be fully identical with. And that's precisely why you always contain the freedom to escape them. Althusser locks you into place. You're puppet on a string. It is this kind of over-determinism with Althusser. Slavoj and Delar are pointing out why we're never just puppets on strings and how we always contain the possibility of cutting the strings.
Well, and also, like this is why that transgression, this is why that shared guilt works to bind identities together or communities with whom you identify together, because it's like you're coming together and saying, oh, you're guilty too, I'm guilty, you're guilty, like, so it's we can agree that we are guilty in this way, because the law is always split into the letter and the spirit, no matter where you are, no matter where you go. So you're going to belong to America, but then you're going to have a subcategory, a sub-identity in, oh, I'm an American, but I'm an American worker, I'm an American punk rocker, I'm an American this, I'm an American that. And that guilt binds your identity, community, group, whatever, you're a deplorable. Well, if we're all deplorables, then let's be the best deplorables we can be, because it's always in tension, but between what is and what is not, what is said and what is not said.
Exactly. Look, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this thing that I just can't help it. And this is Todd's influence on me, right? Slavoj would not have us go in this direction. Todd would. I'm sorry, I cannot help but think this whole thing in Sartrean terms. Okay? For Sartre, this nothingness that we are, that remains even when we strip all of our positive identifying markers away, I'm a Bone Thugs and Harmony fan. I'm a philosophy lover. I'm blah 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 blah. All these things that make up our positive identities. I'm the son of so and so. I was born in this city and blah blah blah, right? Fine. Those are all true things that I do have to own and take responsibility for, but I am not reducible to them. And this is what Zizek wants us to understand about our symbolic identities. It's also what Sartre wants us to understand, because consciousness for Sartre is no thing. It doesn't actually seem to possess any positive characteristics except that it exists, right? But it doesn't have positivistic determinations the way that our lamps or our couches or our dogs or our bodies have, right? You can't weigh consciousness. You can't, you know, it is this nothingness that floods the world, and it does seek to reify itself in certain instances in bad faith, but it's duping itself. And so Sartre's term for this is consciousness. Zizek's term for this is subjectivity, or real subjectivity of the Lacanian real type. No, he doesn't want it identified with consciousness. The point is, both Sartrean consciousness, or the for itself, and the Lacanian Zizekian subject are both defined as a negative entity. And again, Lacan was far more inspired by Sartre than he ever gave him credit for. And yes, we've talked about it recently, but yeah, Sartre leaves out the unconscious. But okay, Lacan is basically Sartre plus Freud. And Zizek takes that up, but if you ask Slavoj about Sartre, he's very dismissive. He doesn't want to be compared to Sartre. And fine, but what I like about Todd is very quick to make this identification with Sartre, and this is something that has influenced me, and I think it's right. Obviously there's work to be done on how to square this circle, but there's too much. There's already so much convenient overlap that the discrepancies, I think, could be worked out, and I think Todd will do that eventually. But yeah, I think this helps us get to this point of being able to go, wait, what is the negative? Look, the other way to do the negative subject thing is just to say that Descartes found it.
Yep.
He originally arrived at it. The point is he concealed his own discovery. Meaning, in Meditations on First Philosophy and Second Meditation, when he arrives at the I think I am, or the cogito ergo sum, as he puts it in discourse, but what he does via methodological doubt is empty out himself of all of his positive determinations, all of his symbolic identities, and what's left is a kind of free-floating nothing that's aware of itself, but it is self-relating negativity. Like, I don't have any positive characteristics. I've drained myself of all those, but I'm still here, whatever I am. And the problem is he arrives at the negative subject, And then he goes on to fill it back in and substantialize it and do all that and turn it into res cogitans. And okay, so he wasn't faithful to it and he didn't understand what he had. But you're more than your symbolic identities. And that's what Althusser doesn't get in his theory of ideology. And I would argue, based on Althusser's influence, it's also what Badiou doesn't get. Badiou is very Althusserian with this whole thing. Like, you have the pre-faithful or the pre-faithful subject, the one who has fidelity to the truth event, and then the subject proper gets activated through fidelity to a truth event. It's very similar to what Althusser's doing. And what Slavoj just doing here is emphasizing this negative moment between the pre-ideological subject and the ideological subject, and this vanishing mediator point is the crucial point, because it's the point that shows we're never going to be identical to the identification we accept.
So we are again at the tension between the public law and its obscene superego underside. The ideological recognition in the call of the other is the act of identification, of identifying oneself as the subject of the public law, of assuming one's place in the symbolic order. Whereas the abstract, indeterminate guilt confronts the subject with an impenetrable call that precisely prevents identification, recognition of one's symbolic mandate. The paradox here is that the obscene superego underside is, in one and the same gesture, the necessary support of the public symbolic law and the traumatic vicious circle, the impasse that the subject endeavors to avoid by way of taking refuge in public law. In order to assert itself, public law has to resist its own foundation, to render it invisible.
Okay, so you talked about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. It's very much big other and superego. And because the law itself is inconsistent with itself, um, if your investment is in, okay, here's the thing with Lacan. He talks about alienation, he talks about separation. Alienation is when more or less you come to realize, hey, I'm split. I'm of two minds. I'm inconsistent. I'm not just me. I'm in language and I'm part of a society, and whatever I am is thoroughly mediated by the other, right? So I'm not consistent. I'm not whole, right? And this is this encounter with your own alienation. This is easier for us to do with ourselves than to do with the authorities we invest in.
Yeah.
Separation is when you come to see the other itself as divided and inconsistent and lacking, right? Because the point is, you can accept your own lack and your own alienation, but it's harder to do it with the thing that you think promises to cure this, that holds out the hope of filling the void, right? And so, but if you don't engage in disavowal, you can have a moment where you can reckon with all this. So, fetishist disavowal in this case would be, I know very well there's inconsistencies within my society between big other and superego. But nevertheless, I act like the law is a substantial, consistent agency that has my best interest in heart. Okay. Apply this to the obscene, intense example of the Ku Klux Klan. So in Southern America, you had the public law, which was Christianity: treat others kindly, be forgiving, never harm others, certainly don't kill, blah, 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 blah. All these official protocols. Well, the nightly beatings and lynchings and all this completely are at odds with the public official mandates of that society, right? Now, if you're not going to disavow it, right? If you're going to dwell in that contradiction, it's going to affect you. and it's going to affect how you relate to that society. But that's the issue, is that when you're invested in your society, you don't want to face this inconsistency in itself. How the terrible aspects of it, or at least some of the terrible aspects of it, actually support and reinforce what you think are the aspects of the society that would completely shun those. And this is where people who do reckon with this contradiction within the symbolic order itself are the ones who have a tendency to become very depressed with the situation, because you no longer can have faith in your symbolic order, because you see how it's structured by forms of inherent transgression that you can't co-sign. And so this is why some people brush it under the rug, and they'll avoid at all costs. Again, forget disavow. They'll just deny reckoning with any of this because they can't handle it. And then you have the ones that are like, no, hit me with all of it. I want the red pill, right? And those are the ones who become very much disillusioned a lot of the time, because they see it for what it is, and a lot of time they don't think there's anything they can do about it.
Yep.
So this is what comes with doing ideology critique. This is I wish I could say that obviously there's an exhilaration in seeing something hidden about your society. There can be a, it can be, there's a, oh, wow, right? But it can also lead to disillusionment and depression and all that. And so that's why it's hard to get somebody to be invested in ideology critique who hasn't arrived at that themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference between critique and conspiracism, it's a fine line, man, because there is a compelling, like, it's exciting to cut through the bullshit. It's like you're in the jungle with a machete and you're chopping through the weeds and you're like exploring things that are hidden. It's exciting. But it can very quickly become like conspiracist. I don't know, just like the people, the deconstructionists on the left. Like there's a type of leftist who only wants to deconstruct and only wants to like point out the flaws in everything. But never, and I hate that people say, "Oh,
They
you
don't
have to build
offer a
something
positive
else."
vision, an alternative.
Yeah. Like it is kind of cliche, but it's also true. Like if you're gonna tear things down, you also have to build something else. So while it's easy for people on the left to joke and make fun of QAnon, because they're crazy conspiracists, but it's like you're doing the same thing if all you ever do is deconstruct and all you ever do is try to undermine and point out the flaws in things. Or go too far in the postmodern direction where nothing is actually real. Nothing is actually really happening. So I think there's a fine line between critique and conspiracism. And I think it's up to, I don't know, people who are genuinely
They seem
invested.
very similar, but
They do. Yeah.
The object that essentially orients them, and I use object in this weird abstract psychoanalytic sense, the object is different. So what the conspiracist is doing is pursuing the plenitude of the center of power. I'm going to get to that central point that organizes and imposes this system upon us. There is a hard kernel of authority, whether it's the Illuminati or whether it's the Epstein thing or whether it's this or that or the other. Okay, so the conspiracist is going for the hard kernel of positivity at the center of this system. The critic, the critiquer, is is trying to highlight that there is no center
Yeah.
of power. There is, I mean, Foucault understood this. It's there's power is this thing that's systematically distributed, but there is no other of the other. There is no super big other that is ultimately controlling our big other. And that's what's so difficult. The there's a kind of faux optimism in conspiracy theories, which is we can get to the center of power somehow, some way. And if we do that, we can, I don't know, force it to, I don't know. There's nothing to do except
Yeah.
from the perspective of critique, there's nothing to do but highlight that ultimately we just have groundless grounds. And the beauty of that, it's frustrating because it's harder to change things. Because it's almost like, oh, if you get to the center of power, if you get to the big bad, just cut his head off and problem solved.
Yeah.
That's this faux optimism. The problem, thinking in more critical or structural terms, is that there is a big bad, but it's distributed across a whole system
Yep.
of relations, and
And
there is no center. There's no head to chop off.
yeah, not only is it distributed and decentered, you are part of it. Like we are guilty. Like we are guilty
Our
in this
actions
sense.
and
Like
beliefs
yeah.
give body to these virtual mechanisms that have power over us.
Yeah. And that again, that's why we're free. Because ultimately it is up to us. We could create a new order. Um but yeah, that's difficult. Try to get 9 million people to work together on something. Just won't happen.
Okay, let's see what the unthought in Althusser's theory is.
What remains unthought in Althusser's theory of interpellation is thus the fact that prior to ideological recognition, we have an intermediate moment of obscene, impenetrable interpellation without identification, a kind of vanishing mediator that has to become invisible if the subject is to achieve symbolic identity, to accomplish the gesture of subjectivization. In short, the unthought of Althusser is that there is already an uncanny subject that precedes the gesture of subjectivization. Is not this subject prior to subjectivization a pure theoretical construction and, as such, of no use for a concrete social analysis? Evidence to the contrary is offered by the syntagm that recurs regularly when social workers attempt to render their experience of the antisocial adolescent criminal who lacks what we ideologically call the elementary sense of compassion and moral responsibility. When you look into his eyes, it seems as if there is nobody home.
The empty subject. And so Slavoj's point is that for troubled youth who have no core symbolic identities, the man with no name, right? That this is also a very troubling position to be in. And if we don't understand the negative subject, we won't be able to fully understand what's going on with this type of person. So, look, when he talks about the subject prior to subjectivization, that really means identification, because what subjectivization means for these French thinkers like Althusser and D&G, right? It means becoming a consumer, becoming a worker, becoming a father. Well, okay, those are identities. What they call subjectivization is really the process of taking on symbolic identities. And Slavoj's point is, yeah, but that's not what we really are. There's a subject, a negative subject, prior to that, that is not identical to any of the positive identities that are being mandated. And this empty self, this voided subject, if we don't take it into account, we can't understand what's really going on with the human, especially in relation to ideology and power and authority.
All right. The key Althusserian text here is 3 notes on the theory of discourses. In the first note, Althusser proposes the hypothesis according to which each of the 4 fundamental types of discourse implies a specific mode of subjectivity. That is, brings about its own effect of subject. In ideological discourse, the subject is present in person. In scientific discourse, it is absent in person. In aesthetic discourse, it is present through interposed persons. In unconscious discourse, the subject is neither present nor simply absent, but a gap represented by a placeholder. In the third note, however, Althusser suddenly and rather unexpectedly pulls back and constrains the subject to ideological discourse, emphasizing that one can speak of the subject of science or the subject of the unconscious only in a metaphorical sense. The moment we accept this position, of course, we are compelled to repudiate the very notion of the divided subject. As Althusser puts it, there is no divided subject. There is only the subject plus the abyss that gapes between the subject and the order of discourse. In short, Lacan illegitimately identifies the void, the gap, that undermines the self-identity of the subject with the subject itself.
So, okay, this is where you just end up choosing. And I think Lacan and Zizek are right.
Yeah.
I think that what the subject is, what subjectivity is a thing that is radically negative. And again, if you push me in that direction, I'll just say it's Sartrean consciousness plus an unconscious.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd have to. I mean, that requires detail to pull that off for real. But um, yeah, and the reason I think this is true is because of how much we fail to just be puppets on a string.
Mhm.
Like, we're not. Nobody is. Even the people who seem the most ideological still fail to live up to the interpolated identity. And something in us is always driving us, driving us to undermine our identities. And by that I mean death drive, but also this negative subjectivity, which, I mean, it knows that it's never what it's identified to be. And, I get it. People can go, well, what is the negative subject? Right. It's tricky because it's precisely the thing you really can't say anything about.
Yeah.
Right. It's negative, but you're constantly witnessing its impacts and its effects.
Yeah.
And all you have to do, just be a good, tell somebody who you notice has trouble being a good mom or a good dad, just be a good mom or a good dad. Well, okay, if they accept the interpolation, if they say, I take it upon myself to be a good mother or a good father, then what's the problem? What's derailing this? Something in us more than us, something in us more than our symbolic identities. And so, to me, if you miss this, you miss the human, you miss human ontology.
Mm.
And You know, I'm just very much, I believe this is right. I think this is it as far as the human being is concerned. Um, and it's what prevents us from ever being locked into an ideology once and for all.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it is difficult because there are people who just don't accept this.
Sure.
And it's I don't know, just to me it's like, yeah, but if you look around and if you look, this is how we operate at every level. At our personal identities, we are constantly undermining our personal identities. Um, with our group identities and communities and stuff like there's always this element of transgression being the thing that completes whatever process is going on. Like there's always this element, there's always this surplus, there's always this accursed share that just not even that it has to be dealt with, it expresses itself whether we want it to or not, always. um and this accounts for it. This negative subjectivity is an attempt to describe the shape of it, because it is the thing about which you can say nothing. So we have to try to come up to the edge and work our way around the edge and describe the edge, because the content, we can't describe the content.
Look, and I get it. I know why analytic philosophers want to give a shit for this. I'm sympathetic, which is, hey, you guys are basically saying there's a negativity that's also a positivity. Right.
Yeah.
We are. Like, but it's not a positivity the way that the copy of Machine Decision is not final is a positivity, or the way my iPhone is a positivity, right? It's not it's not cut from that ontological cloth, right?
Yeah.
And so in the most technical sense, is the subject positive? Yes, if we mean it exists, it's positive. But if we mean that it is definable in terms of a set of positive characteristics, then no. And that's frustrating. But and I understand that's fine. But this is the subject that Freudian Lacanian psychoanalysis encounters every day. When the analyst sits down to do analysis with an analysand, this is what they run up to, is just this complete inconsistency with you're sitting there and the patient's going to tell you all about themselves and they're going to lay out their positive characteristics, and this is what defines me as the person I am. And what the analyst comes to see is that is not what is happening here. There are all these unconscious factors that determine who this subject is. And the idea that this speaking being sitting across from me is reducible to the narrative and idealized images and signifiers that it says and it says about itself and identifies with, it's laughable. That is not what's going on with this speaking subject. And that this division between what the subject is and how it talks about itself is something that every analyst deals with day in and day out. And you have to constantly realize, like, these positive characteristics are not it. And when you go all the way back, you end up just going, there is this speaking agency that is incredibly difficult to define, but what it is not is its egoic positive traits.
Yeah. It is what it is not, or it is not what it is.
And it's funny. So this also gets referred to as the subject of the unconscious, right? What is this? What is this agency that, you know, lets us, that punches a slip of the tongue through? Who does that? Well, something in me more than me. Because then my ego tries to go, that's not what I meant. Oh, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
But but the me that meant it is not the I that thinks it's communicating and describing itself. It's the subject. Now, Descartes arrived at this negative subject in Meditations. But there's also this reason why Lacan identified this negative subject with the subject of science. What does the subject of science do? If you're a pure scientific investigator, you empty yourself of all as much as possible. Maybe it's just an abstract ideal, fine, but you empty yourself of all of your positive characteristics and prejudices, and you become this kind of negativized pure knower, right? Who your parents were doesn't factor into this. What baseball team you like most doesn't factor into this. You are draining yourself of all of this personal content to become a pure subject of science. Okay, very much like how the subject of the unconscious is. And what does Althusser do? He goes, "Oh, these two are just metaphors. This isn't."
Mhm.
No, but Lacan and Žižek said, "No, this is the hard kernel of our ontology." And this is the reason Althusser doesn't get this fully is because he doesn't get the real. He thinks he understands the symbolic, he understands the imaginary, but he doesn't get how this gap within the symbolic functions and is every bit as implicated in our experience, right? The Borromean knot, imaginary, symbolic, real, all fit together. And the register of the real is just something that Althusser was not able to really come to terms with or theoretically integrate into his thinking, and that's the lack in it.
The lack. Our Lacanian standpoint compels us here to persist with Althusser 1, that of the four effects of subject, against Althusser 2, that of the ideological status of the subject. Althusser's constraining of the subject to ideology is a clear case of theoretical regression. The four effects of subject in Althusser 1 are clearly not of equal weight. There are two candidates for the role of subject par excellence, either the ideological subject, present in person, or the subject of the unconscious, a gap in the structure, part S, that is merely represented by a signifier. Althusser opted for the first choice, ideological status of the subject, whereas from the Lacanian standpoint, the second choice seems far more productive. It allows us to conceive of the remaining three effects of subject as the derivations, occultations, of Bardas, as the three modes of coming to terms with the gap in the structure that is the subject.
So, I mean, that's all I can say really is I agree with I'm I think that if you start with the barred subject, that explains what's going on with these other subjectivities, which are really identities. I mean, of course, the subject of science, the way I drew the analogy, that's up for debate. But no, what we're getting at here is subjectivity versus identity.
Yep.
And these are the terms that I prefer to talk about this difference in. Identity has to do with the positive characteristics, uh, with the identifications we make, both imaginary and symbolic, right? And subjectivity has to do with that dimension of ourselves that's never reducible to that series of identifications. And that's the negative
We
subject. Yeah.
we when we talked about the movie Begonia, we also mentioned Sorry to Bother You. And I think we were like, both of these films are great. They're both, they have this revolutionary, emancipatory message, and they're great films. But the key difference is that Sorry to Bother You is identical, whereas begonia is all about negativity in the subject. So begonia is subjective. Sorry to bother you is identical. And I think for me, that is a demonstration of what we mean by identical and subjective.
Can I try to reword that, because I think the
Yeah,
point
yeah.
you're making, it needs to be brought out more. What you're saying is that it's not that sorry to bother you represents identity and begonia represents subjectivity. It's that no, like sorry to bother you is a film that's trying to be identical to itself, meaning it takes very clear political stances. It's trying to identify with a political cause, and that's all it is. Whereas begonia is split within itself about what it's trying to say, or what stance it wants to take. And this kind of internal division uh in begonia is far more representative of, or I just said it doesn't represent it, but it's instantiating subjectivity in a film itself. Whereas sorry to bother you, which I love,
Yeah.
but it, sorry to bother you is a film that would say, I know what I am, I know what I'm communicating, and there's no inconsistency here. Whereas I think begonia has come to terms with its own inconsistency.
Yeah. I mean, it's performing this subjective position. It's performing the inconsistency, the non-identity. Um, whereas sorry to bother you, it's performing certainty. And again, they're both great films. I think an example of a horrible identical movie would be One Battle After the Next. Like
One
that,
battle after another. You can't.
one battle
You hate
after
it so much you can't even say the title.
But that movie it's trying to be identical. Um,
Yeah, in the worst
and
way.
In the worst way. And I also think it fails. I think it was half-ass. I don't think I don't think the main people responsible for that film are they hold the beliefs that they're espousing. Whereas I know Boots Riley holds radical emancipatory beliefs. And I think that's why it was a better film.
Well, Boots is like the Bedouin subject,
Yes.
faithful to a
Yeah.
political cause,
Yep.
and really wants to be identical to that. Okay, I don't think that's possible, but I'm sympathetic to where it's coming from. Whereas One Battle After Another is this. Yeah,
Yeah. We'll do an episode on it.
yeah.
Soon.
We'll be returning to that subject or that identity.
Yeah. An additional argument for the Lacanian choice is provided by the symptomal reading of Althusser himself. Is not the shift in Althusser's theory announced by his essay on Lenin and philosophy, the self-critical repudiation of theoreticist deviation, the assertion of class struggle in theory, the theory's self-referentiality, that is, the notion that theory is included in its object, a kind of return of the repressed, of the dimension of the subject of the signifier. What is indicative here is Althusser's new definition of philosophy, which encapsulates this shift. No longer philosophy is the theory of theoretical practice, but philosophy represents politics or class struggle in theory. Is this not a clear variant of Lacan's "a signifier represents the subject for another signifier"? Class struggle as the gap that prevents totalization is the sole true subject of history, whereas philosophy is the master signifier, S1, that represents the subject, the class struggle, for the theory within the field of knowledge, S2.
So, long story short, what he's getting at here is he's saying Althusser at his best is a Lacanian. He just doesn't stay in that pocket very much. But he wants to emphasize that there is this moment in Althusser that is tapped into the Lacanian subject, the Bard S, Um, and you know, he's drawing this homology between the gap in the subject and the gap in society itself, which is class struggle. So,
Yeah.
in this sense, I mean, if you want to read it this way, class struggle is the gap that forever prevents the A equals A of society. It marks the internal contradiction, the internal split of society, right? Which makes it homologous to the split within the subject itself between conscious and unconscious, identity and subjectivity, blah blah blah. And so what Slavoj doesn't say there is like, okay, when Althusser is at his most Marxist, he's also at his most Lacanian. And so
Yeah.
that's his look. That's after all these years of now writing theory, I know what that's his little cherry on top.
Yeah.
It's like, look what I just did there. Now, okay. Obviously, this was an initial go at this section. Like the whole, like we could, oh, S1 master signifier, S2 knowledge. There's a whole nother, there's more detail to unpack in this, but if we did that, that requires almost a series of videos to do this
Yeah.
thing, right? We just wanted to do an introduction to this section that is incredibly important to us. And I think it gets to this core aspect of what the Lacanian Žižekian subject is and how it marks always our potential freedom from ideology while always being submerged in it, right?
Yeah.
But it means that we're never purely identical to our interpolated identities and is the point of our non-identity with our identities. And again, that is the point of freedom. We are not determined to just be reducible to our imposed identities.
Yeah. It's the nothing that noths, or the no thing. This is it. I think this chapter in the supercut uh Žižek book of our our phantasmatic supercut Žižek book that takes chapters from 30 of his different books and it puts them into one book. This chapter would be near the front of that book.
It's easily the top 5 for me. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
there's 2 others that's like maybe contender for number 1, but this is in the running for
Yeah.
the number 1
Top 3.
slot.
Top 3.
I
I'll
think
say top 3. This is
I'm
top
not gonna
3.
name
Sure thing.
I'm not going to name. So recently, thanks to Matthew Flisfetter, he recommended this. I'm not going to say what it is, but because at some point I want to do something on this. I revisited a chapter from one of the key early books, and I'd read this before, but boy, did it never hit me the way that it should. It is now a contender for what I think is maybe the best chapter he ever wrote, over and above Superego by default, even though this one's right there with it. But I'm going to save that because it's sadly a chapter nobody talks about or refers to that, and it should be the chapter. But it's incredibly difficult, much more difficult than what we just read. But look, I mean, some of the other examples, obviously, that come to mind are like chapter 3, A Sublime Object, which is, all about ideology and interpolation. It's this, but even more fleshed out. I got like the Bartleby politics in chapter 6 of Parallax View, and then there's 2 great chapters in particular subject. So, like I say, like this virtual Zizek book that I always am thinking of. Yeah, it consists of all these chapters, but look, Superego by default. I think here's what I will say. If anybody was to say, where should I start with Zizek and his theoretical, like this chapter, you cannot do better than this.
Yeah. Well, we've a couple times realized like we're taking superego and doing something with it. So having conversations with people about superego, it's easy to forget that we're doing something with superego. And like we've run into conversations where people either don't understand what we're trying to say, or just kind of look at us like, what the fuck? Why are you talking about the superego?
Well,
Like, what does that have to do
superego and
with this at
artificial
all?
intelligence. Wait, what?
Yeah. But I think for us, the superego is this thing that we must reckon with. So I definitely would recommend this chapter. Like, hey, read this fucking chapter because just does so much.
The work we're doing on superego and AI, this is the bedrock theory foundation, right? It's not Freud, and it's not in Lacan seminars. It's this chapter laid the foundation for how we think about superego. And so, yeah, I mean, it's beyond just theoretical, I think in terms of it's like, no, we're writing theory on the basis of these insights. So, and I mean, when, the the title of my book, Capital versus Subjectivity, the very way I think about subjectivity, the very heart of what I mean by that word is this.
Yep.
It is this non-identity with our identities. And what does capital do? It's an identity machine, spurred on by the imperative to enjoy cultivating our identities. And yeah, I think capital is anti-subjectivity, but it's very pro-identity.
Yep.
And that's maybe the core issue I have with it. But yeah, so I mean, whatever we're doing, whether it's superego and AI or how we think about subjectivity, I mean, this chapter, it has it all. The stuff on subjectivity, yeah, it's elaborated in more detail in other chapters. Same with ideology. But if you want, like,
it's all here,
all
dude.
condensed here, you can't beat this chapter.
Yep.
And I will say this: this is the chapter on superego in his work. There's not a better chapter on There's better chapters on ideology, and there's better chapters on subjectivity. There's not a better chapter on superego.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Well, we did it. Like I say, I think there's a lot more, that we can unpack in this chapter, but this is a good initial run at it. So yeah, I'm super happy we finally got to do this.
Yeah. It's been almost a year. So
that's wild.
Yeah, that's a trip.
All right, guys. Well, if you haven't, go check out 3 Billion Nances. Like, follow, subscribe, whatever the kids say. And
skeet skeet. Are kids still saying skeet skeet?
Are they?
I don't think so.
we have some other interviews that we're trying to get lined up. So there's some cool plans in the works. I don't know right now. We're both, we've kind of been taking it a little bit slower in how the content we're pumping out, just because we're working on other projects. I don't know if to them it seems like we're going at a slower rate, but to us it seems like that.
Yeah, I think they probably didn't notice because there's still a lot out there, and there's still people working their way through through old stuff.
Yeah, I had somebody message me and they're like, "I'm finally listening to your nearly 8-hour exegesis of xenofeminism, Xenofeminist Manifesto." And so, like I say, there's people who get around to it much later, and and then guys, we have so much footage of Nick Land, it's I still am sitting here going, I don't know what to do with it because I don't want to release it just as is because it's a serious, like the second day we talked to him, it was really shoot the shit kind of
Yeah.
vibe. And so some of this is going to be needed to be edited together, but that will be coming out at some point. You released some of it already, with him talking about Bataille and Elon Musk and uh, you know, drinking up the sun or sucking on the tit of
Suckling
the
on
sun.
suckling on the teat of the sun.
Yeah. And so,
But I mean, we've both gotten writing done recently, a lot more writing done than the previous 6 months or so, I'd say. So yeah, like things are coming.
in the last 2 weeks or so, I've gotten more messages of people going, "Where is your fucking book? I will buy it right now. How do I get your book?" And it's just the main thing for me now is just because nobody thinks it's ever coming back out. And I get it. I wouldn't believe it if I were you guys either, but it is. And that's really kind of where the focus is at. You know that because I send you the stuff I'm writing as I'm writing it and adding it in. So that's kind of the main focus. But we definitely have some interviews in the works and some other exegeses we want to finally get to, and some other fun conversations. So stay tuned. More to come.
Stay tuned. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.
Batman.